But please welcome my brother Steve Micham. He's also my business partner and my best friend. Well, you guys, you saw earlier the two slides of the $5,000 credit card analogy, and there was a very wise and a less wise. This is Barry. I'm less. I'm here to tell you what not to do, because I've done most everything wrong. So you know, I'm actually here to just kind of share a little bit about my story and some of the things that I've learned as a result of doing things the wrong way. You know, a couple of years ago I broke my foot, and I had to have surgery. And as kind of after surgery, I had a cast on my foot, and I had to walk with crutches, and I had to learn how to drive my car with my left foot, my left leg, and had to kind of learn to walk again. I mean, it was, you know, when if anybody here has broken a limb, you have to learn how to walk again. You got to get, you know, rehab. You have to go through physical rehab, and you have to get used to walking properly again. If you don't do that, the bones don't heal properly, and you keep going through the same things. You'll have recurring issues with that bone or with that foot or leg or whatever it is. And I realized as I was going through that there's kind of an analogy there, there's a similarity there to the way we live our lives. You know, the things that we go through in our lives, the major events, you know, the things that set us back in life, they can be like a breaking of a limb, and we have to kind of relearn things. And it's like going back to toddler phase. You know, you kind of are starting to feel your way around in the world. For me, there's been two major events that have been what I would consider a breaking of both limbs, as far as, you know, spiritually and emotionally and mentally. The one was my divorce. Going through my divorce, coming out of that, I really had to relearn who I was, because you know, when you have somebody that you know, that you're married to, that, I mean, you know, when you go through a divorce, you have somebody that's kind of making a conscious decision not to be with you anymore. And when you go through that, you kind of have to get out there and feel your way around in the world again and learn who you are as a person. And the second thing I went through that was like the breaking of both legs is a bankruptcy. I went through a financial bankruptcy, and I had to completely relearn how to do life with my credit and with, you know, my spending, and how to get back on my feet and to walk. Now, one of the first things that a physical therapist will do if you've broken your legs is they're going to make sure that you're starting on a solid foundation.
Amen, brother, amen.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're going to make sure that you have solid ground and you have ample support to, you know, to work on your limbs and to get them stronger. And, you know, they're not going to take you out to the beach. They're not going to take you out onto the sand and try to teach you how to use your limbs again. And you know, all the things that have happened in my life, I had to realize that I had to reestablish a foundation. And I guess backing up to kind of how I got to the point, you know, dealing with my bankruptcy or dealing with that financial issue. You know, starting out from the time I was 11 years old, I started working. I was working for our dad. You know, our dad owned a roofing company, and I'd go over there and sweep his warehouse floors and do different things. And you know, I started working at that point, which was actually full-time over my summers. And by the time I was 15, I got out and got a job. I would go to school, and I'd ride the bus to school. I'd do my homework on the bus and get to school. I'd go to school, do the homework as much as I could on the bus on the way home. I'd get on my bike, I'd ride to work, and I would work until 9 o'clock at night. And I would ride home. I'd get home about 9:30, and you know, usually I was in bed by 10. So I had this thing going every day of the week, and I was very diligent about saving the money that I had, not spending it frivolously, And this went on until I was 20 years old. And when I was 20 years old, I moved out, got my own apartment. It was $325 a month in rent. I had no car payment. I had no bills. I was a manager of a retail appliance and electronics chain. I would get these vendor spiff checks that they would give me for selling their merchandise, and I'd just have those tossed on my dresser. I didn't need the money. I had plenty of savings, and I was doing things the right way. Well, somewhere around that time period, my course got diverted, and it was only a slight veering in my path. But I can look back and actually pinpoint the exact day that my path started to go off in the wrong direction. To the extent that, by the time I realized that I'm this far apart from where I'm supposed to be. I ended up getting married and wanted to, as a man, provide for my family, provide for my wife, for my kids. Wanted to have the best of everything, so I started to buy things. I started to finance things. And then in 2000, I met a couple of guys I was working with. I had just started in the mortgage industry, and they taught me the concept of leveraging. Leveraging is where you take, at least in this particular scenario, you go and buy an investment property. And you do what, buy it cheap, fix it up, do what you're going to do with it. Finance as much as you could possibly finance on it. And then take that money and buy another one. And then you put people into that house that would be paying rent, and they're going to be paying the bills. They're going to be paying the debt on it. So really, you don't owe this money over here because someone else is paying. So you start to do this, and you start to leverage, and you start to build up multiple properties, which is what I started doing. And I had a number of houses, and I had 3 cars, like Kevin was talking about earlier. We had our sports car, we had our convertible, we had 2 vehicles for getting around, and we had payments on all of them. We had, at one point, I think at the high point it was, if I'm remembering correctly, there were 7 houses, we had 3 cars, we had loans on all of them, had a half a dozen credit cards. Money was coming in, we were making good money, but we were paying the minimum payments and just kind of living the high life as far as we were concerned. And I felt stuck in this trap. It was like being on a hill, as the snowball, as it starts to pick up momentum. I felt like I had to do these things because I couldn't let my wife down, I couldn't let my kids down. I had to be able to provide these things. And eventually, some things started to fall apart. And this is in no particular order, but I went through my divorce, which was a very crippling event. I've always been in some sort of a sales position, and when you're going through emotional times, it's very hard to be focused and be able to do what you need to do. And the market shifted, values went down, mortgages were harder to do, and it got to the point where I was robbing Peter to pay Paul for quite some time. I could not pay my bills with my income, but I had probably close to $200,000 worth of credit available to me. And I was just writing checks out of that credit. Pay my bills every month. I'd write a check out of the credit line, deposit it in my checking account, I'd write the bills to everybody, and the cycle would continue. And I didn't know how to get out of it. And I tell you, as a Christian, I've been a Christian for 30 plus years of my life. But I found in the last few years that there's a distinct difference between being a Christian and being a follower of Christ. I was a Christian by name, but I was living my life my way. I was living my life, I would call on God when difficult times came, but I was living life my way. And so I'm struggling as a Christian through 2 things. Number one, going through the divorce, I'm not sure, should I be praying for this to save my marriage, should I allow this to go? And I'm not going to get into all the details with that because it's not really relevant here, but with regards to the finances, I'm thinking, God, I know you have the ability to provide. My mind knows this. But yet, how do I do this? How do I manage to pay these bills? How do I manage to keep things current? And I finally got to the point where I realized that I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep writing checks out of a credit line to pay my bills. Eventually I had to cut it off and stop relying on those credit lines. And so that's what I ended up doing. And then the creditors started calling because they weren't getting paid. Phone calls started happening. The letters started coming in the mail. And it got to the point where I was afraid to answer the phone. I was afraid to open my mail. And it's a scary place to be. And it's especially bad, you know, again, as a man, feeling as though I'm not providing, you know, for the things that my kids need and that my family needs. You know, that's especially difficult to go through. And I'm not saying that it's less for you, the women that are here. But I do know for myself that was really, I felt like a failure, and I didn't know how to get out of the cycle or how to make it better. And so I went on for probably about a year and a half trying to avoid bankruptcy and trying to pay the bills that I could pay and allowing things to stack up. And one thing that's really counterintuitive is when you're unable to pay your bills, that's when your creditors expect the most money. They raise your interest rates, they tack on late fees. You can't pay what you're paying anyway, but that's when they're starting to hit you. They kick you when you're down. The same thing with the insurance, those insurance premiums. When you're at your lowest, that's when they want to charge you the most. Because you don't have much of a choice. You're kind of stuck with what you got. You got to take what's given. And so there's a number of things that I've learned through this process, and I can actually look back on it. It's only been a couple years ago, but I can actually look back on it now and say that I'm grateful that I went through the experience. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and I'll explain why I'm grateful here in a minute. But you know, as I was thinking about what I was going to say up here today, I was thinking back on what Rod had said last week. If any of you heard Rod, it was last Friday night when Rod got up and spoke. And he described this picture, this scene of being a child and running through a meadow, running through the grass. The only thing you had to worry about was getting grass stains on your jeans or whatever, you know, and making sure that you're in before dusk. And I got to thinking back on, you know, I was fortunate. We were blessed to have. We had some land around our house, and we were able to get out and kind of play and go do our thing. And pretty much that was the way it was. We had to be home for dinner. But for the most part, we were able to take off. We didn't have a care in the world. We'd go climb whatever tree we wanted to climb. We'd go play in the river, whatever. And I was thinking back on those times, and I thought, man, that was a time of innocence. You know, that was a time when we were carefree. We were able to run and play and have fun. We didn't care about anything else because everything was provided by our parents. Go home, dinner was on the table. We didn't have to worry about where we got our clothes. Didn't have to do any of these things. But as Rod was explaining last week, as we get older, we realize we have to get out and we have to do these things for ourselves. And we have to figure out how we're going to do these things. And we take it upon ourselves, because there aren't classes taught on these type of things, we take it upon ourselves to figure these things out. And so we start heading down these roads, we start doing these leveraging, we start trying to keep up with the Joneses and making sure that we have, you know, a nice car in the driveway. You know, buy into the line. You know, I remember a friend of mine would always say, you know, I'll always have a car payment. He told me this. He says, I will always have a car payment because I don't want to deal with the maintenance that goes along with a paid off car, because, you know, an older car is going to cost more money in maintenance than, you know, I'd rather have a reliable car that you know, have payments on. Well, I can tell you, I'm driving now, despite the fact that I can afford to go out and get a nicer car. I'm driving a 200,000+ mile minivan because I don't want the payments, and I'd rather have that money put into the bank as much as possible. I'd rather pay the repair bills if I have to pay the repair bills, you know. But I'm better able to do that. I know what it feels like to be in that situation, and I so much want to avoid it.